morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Samantha. I'm the Director of Education with ClubExpress, and our topic for today is contacts, titles, administrators, and coordinators. Oh my, it won't be that scary. But before we dive in, we'll go over just a smidge of housekeeping. All of your phones and microphones are muted, so if you have any questions, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, you can enter them in the chat. My favorite ClubExpress teammate, Devin, is there to help answer those questions. Of course, we will have time for live Q&A at the end, but if you have burning questions, you don't have to wait until the end to get those answered. All of the recordings for all of our webinars are on our YouTube channel. A recording of this webinar will be there as well within a few days. So where can you find them? If you search YouTube for clubexpress.com, that's with the .com spelled out, you can find all of our videos and tutorials. You'll want to make sure you hit that subscribe button for notifications. Of course, it's not just so we increase our subscription count. It's so you get notified whenever we post a new tutorial or a recording of a webinar. And we are, of course, constantly updating our library and constantly updating our tutorials. So you want to make sure you're in the know on that. And you can find lots of other places to follow us and get little updates and tips on clubexpress.com. So whatever your favorite social media platform is, you can find us there. And for all of the upcoming webinars, in case you are interested in what else we have coming through the pipeline, you can check our calendar at clubexpress.com/calendar. In the next coming weeks, we're tackling a handful of our modules again. And then in November, we are going to be taking a little bit of a break. It's not you, it's us. It's so we can focus on the course that we're hosting, which you may have heard about, event drills. So a lot of people have already signed up for this, and we want to make sure that we let everyone know exactly what you're getting, so we can capture everyone, make sure everyone knows the details. So Event Drills is going to be a multi-week course where we essentially meet kind of like we are now. And we go through much more detailed trainings for our event calendar. We're going to be tackling the entire module over the course of several sessions. So we're tackling every nook and cranny, going through all different types of events that you might want to set up. And going through those real world examples. In addition to just training, you also essentially get access to the education department for several hours, multiple times a week with payment for the course. So we host office hours before the course actually kicks off. So half an hour before each session starts, you get to join us and ask us questions about what we may have talked about in a previous session, things that you have questions on about events that have just been burning in your brain. And then we also get time, like we do for these webinars, to have Q&A after. So it gives us a chance to speak with people on a much more concentrated level. And it also gives us a chance to really take our time with training on these courses. And another thing to point out is that when you sign up for Event Drills, you are signing your entire club up, your team of admins and coordinators for that course. Now, in today's session, we're going to talk a lot about what's an admin, what's a coordinator, who gets access to what. So you'll kind of get an idea of how many people in your organization could potentially have access to this content. And that's something that's true with all of our ClubExpress courses. Many of you have purchased past courses. We've hosted boot camps, courses on website design. And your entire team of admins and coordinators get access to the live sessions and the recordings. What's more is that whenever you assign someone as an admin or coordinator in the future, like we're going to talk about today, they'll get access to those recordings too. So you kind of start to build yourself a little bit of a training library. And of course, if you want more info, you can head to clubexpress.com, and we have a big banner on our homepage to talk about the course, and you can sign up for that through your club's support tab. So without further ado, we will go ahead and dive into our topic today. So, today we're going to be talking about something that kind of pairs with some of the recent webinars that we've hosted. So, we've talked about website security, we've talked about different levels of access on your site. We certainly talked about levels of access when we talked about the recent updates to our control panel and dashboard, and what coordinator access might trigger different views for your dashboard. So this is kind of going with that series of webinars where we're talking about who has access to what on your site, who's listed on your site for people to contact, and all of the things that go into making sure your admin team is set up for success. So the first thing that we're going to do is do a brief overview of the topics that we're talking about. Then we're going to dive into our demonstration. So the first thing that we'll talk about would be an overview of what's a title, what's a contact. Now, the title of our webinar is Titles, Contacts, Administrators, and Coordinators. And they can all certainly go hand in hand. And there may certainly be some overlap. There may be plenty of administrators in your organization that are also listed with a title on your Contact Us page. But there might be plenty of people who work on the back end who are not listed and who are not meant to be contacted by the public or even by members on a regular basis. So your contacts and titles are generally people where you're either members of the public or members of your organization need to reach out to. So first, when you're talking about titles and contacts, you're defining titles that are used by your organization. And those could be titles that are similar to titles everyone uses, like president, treasurer, committee lead, but they can also be titles that are specific to you, like Commodore or ride leader, where maybe those titles are essentially serving the duties of a president or a committee leader, but you've called them something different. So you can customize those titles and make sure that the people that are being contacted are identified properly. And then, of course, you pair them with contacts and committee chairs so that the title is applied to the right person in your organization. So we kind of create the hat, or we create that place card. Now we have to pair it with a person. Now, with titles and contacts, this is one of the things that a lot of people tend to miss when they want to set up notifications for some of their officers, mainly the membership director and your treasurer. So the system does have the ability to send out automatic notifications when certain actions are taken on your site to those officers. So we want to make sure that you get those folks set up on the back end so that the system can notify them. Now, the contacts are people in your organizations that users need to reach for either general inquiries or specific questions that they have. That would be your membership director, your treasurer, your event director. So you may have titles that are being applied to people that aren't necessarily being shown on your website. You may have a membership director, but maybe you don't want their contact information shown on your site. You don't have to display all of this information, but connecting those titles and contacts, again, can be useful for a lot of different things on your site. So we're going to talk about adding in titles and pairing those with contacts in your organization and what that looks like. Now, as we mentioned, administrators and all kinds of coordinators could also be a contact that someone might need to reach out to. But more likely, they might just be folks that are working on the back end on your site that maybe don't have a lot of interaction with other members or members of the general public. Now, with ClubExpress, there are 7 different levels of security. And this looks like an exhaustive list, and it is. But the good news is we're going to be diving into each of these to kind of take a look from the different perspectives of a module coordinator or a subgroup admin to see what their view looks like and how their access changes. So we're going to be referring back to some of these points quite a bit, but just to go through them very quickly, at the top, you have an administrator. An administrator has access to all features, all databases. There's nothing that stands in their way from being able to configure a module, make changes to a member's profile, make changes to the website, run reports, anything like that. Next down, you have module coordinators. Now, these are folks that have administrative access to one entire single module, and they also have the ability to configure that module. So when you think about someone who is a module level coordinator, someone who might have access to, let's say, the volunteering module, they're going to be able to add and configure categories, set up volunteering opportunities and slots. They're going to be able to behave within the module as though they're an administrator, but only within that module. Now, a subgroup admin might seem very similar to a full website administrator, but if you were present for our webinar talking about our dashboard and our control panel, you recall that subgroup administrators only have site-wide access to modules and databases for their subgroup. They do not have the ability to access setup features on your site. So when you have a subgroup administrator on your website who is, maybe poking around trying to maybe change the look and feel of the site, they wouldn't be able to do that. They'd only be able to access the top two portions of the control panel. So all of those setup features are unavailable to a subgroup administrator. Now, apart from that, we're getting into coordinators who have much more specific access, even more specific than someone who can access just a single module. Many of our modules have portions that can be assigned access to a specific person, like custom pages, photo albums, events, forums, and blogs, like you see on your screen. So with custom page and photo album coordinators, they have access to a single custom page or photo album. Now, this is going to be useful for people who just want a little bit of help getting a couple of custom pages up, or they want someone to have access to a few pages that they can constantly keep updated. With access to a custom page or a photo album, you get access to the control panel. Now, even though you only have access to a single item, we'll see what this looks like when we take a look at some of our access that we've set up prior to this webinar, but you do get access to just that item within the control panel. But taking a look at what we've seen so far, the first four of our list of 7 layers of security, the first 4 folks, whenever they're given access to something, they also get access to the control panel. Now, what that means is they have access to the dashboard potentially with some info there, and they have access to the support tab. Now, that support tab is going to be really beneficial. One, it includes all of our support information. It includes quick access to manuals and videos. It also includes access to bootcamp courses and courses that we host as part of the education team's initiatives. So when you're thinking about signing up for courses, whether that's now or future courses, anyone who has those first 4 levels of access would be able to access those courses. Now, apart from that, now you're getting into what would be very, very light access or almost no access at all. Underneath our custom page and photo album coordinators, you have event contacts, forum moderators, and blog authors. Now, very similar to your custom page and photo album coordinators, those folks have access to a single item. And that access is, of course, granted by an administrator. Now, the difference between those two and why we separate those levels of access out are the folks who are event contacts, forum moderators, they won't get access to the control panel. They will only have access to the single item created for them, and they'd be able to access it the same way that an administrator would. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment, not through the control panel, but through the front end of your website. So if you're interested again in, even thinking about the access that you might want to give someone where you want them to be able to manage a few things, but don't want them to have access to anything else, you can think about giving them very granular access. And of course, your members can only access member-only content, and they can manage their own data. And we talked about that when we talked about website and member privacy, that members have the ability to manage and control their data. And then your website visitors who only have access to public content or content that's meant for everyone. That includes custom pages that you've set up, documents that you've put in your document library, modules that you've configured. So That's a lot of different people that we're going to take a look at. So, what we're going to be doing in our demonstration today is we're going to take a look first at contacts and titles, and then we're going to take a look at a few different people that we've set up with specific access. So, one, we're going to take a look at how we configured the access for each of the 4 people that we're going to visit today, both Jenny and Larry Cho, Manny Diaz, and Samantha Elizabeth. So we're going to take a look at how we've set up their access as an administrator, because remember, administrators are the ones who are going to be setting up all of these rights. And then we're going to pop into each of their profiles and kind of take a look and see what they see when they sign in. So let me go ahead and switch gears here. I'm going to change my shares and give me just a quick moment. All right, everyone should be seeing the Northwest Balloon Club. This is one of our demo clubs. I'm going to go ahead and sign in as an administrator first. I'm signing in as Martin Smith, and we're going to be taking a look at the control panel, and we're going to spend a lot of time basically just looking at different options within the control panel and how we manage our team, our admins, and coordinators. Our first stop is going to be our club tab. Now, our club tab is labeled club because our organization is a club. Your club tab may be labeled differently based on the type of organization you're in. Your tab may be labeled association, league, something similar. If you're interested in seeing how that's changed, right down here in club options, very quickly, if I select that, we can see that at the top, my keyword for my organization is currently club. If I were to change that to association, center, chapter, that would change the name of my tab. I'm going to cancel out of this and not do that right now. Right now, what I want to focus on are our titles and our contacts. So let's visit our titles option, which again is in our club tab in the setup section. I'm going to select titles and take a look at the titles that we have here and what it looks like to add a new title. Our grid listing titles includes the title, what they may be serving as in your organization, an email address that might be associated with them, and some options in the maintain column to edit or delete the title. Now, when I add a new title, all I'm doing is naming the title. And as I mentioned at the top, this might be a title that you use specific to your organization. It might be a title that is something that we use across the board. So for example, finance director at the bottom here, perhaps our finance director is what we call our treasurer. So instead of using treasurer as the title that we have here, we've called this our finance director. Now, our email address is an email address that is associated with the title. Now, when you are listing a contact on your website, you have the option to say, I want the title email address to show, or I want that contact's personal email address to show. So if you have a title email address, this is the spot where you'd enter it in. That just means that the email address never changes, no matter who's sitting in that position in your organization. So this is always going to be the email address for our finance director. I'll go ahead and save this. And now I can see that within the column for treasurer for my finance director, I have that yes box checked. Now, these 5 titles here are not the only titles that you can add. You can see that we have a few co-chair titles. We can add additional titles that we want to see within our organization. We can add an event coordinator title. We're not limited to the 5 that we see here, but the 5 that we see here are useful for system notifications. So we have the option to include different email addresses or contact information in some of our system emails that you have seen if you've configured system emails or made some changes to those. So this is where the system is essentially saying, okay, you want to include your membership director's information in your system email. So we need to know, first of all, who that person is and what they've identified themselves as. Is there an email address associated with the title that needs to be sent to, or is it being sent to the contact that's paired with the title? We have 5 different titles that we've added here for you to choose from: president, membership director, treasurer, webmaster, and data protection officer. And you'll be pretty familiar with some of those titles, especially if you have just set up your website, because those are some of the titles that you configure right away. Now, once we have all of our titles configured, we have a membership director, we have a finance director, and a president. I can change the display sequence. I'm going to go back and return to my control panel because now that I have a handful of titles, the most important titles to my organization, I want to pair them with a contact. I'll go into my Contact Us module, and if you don't see it listed in your Club tab, you can configure the module using the configure option at the top right-hand corner and activate that for your site. Your Contact Us module is your contact page on your website. So I'll open this up in a new tab here, and we can see that our Contact Us page lists our address. So we have some address information here that's coming from our club info. We also have our club contacts that we've decided to display on the site. And at the bottom, we have some general inquiry form that we can use for general questions for the club, followed by website technical support. So let's take a look at the contacts that we have configured already. We have our president, our membership director, and our finance director. And we have some additional info for them. Let's go ahead and add a contact to see what some of this actually means for us. When we add a contact, very similar to our title, we're just configuring some very basic information here. When we're adding in a new contact, we can always pair it with a title. We don't necessarily have to pair it with a title. I'm going to pair my new title with co-chair. I'm going to pair my new contact with co-chair. And I can search through my member database to choose a brand new member. I'll choose Leslie. And Leslie is going to be listed as co-chair, so I can list this as an event coordinator. I can list Leslie as someone who helps out with charity or philanthropy or anything like that. When I'm creating those titles, again, they're specific to your organization. This is the space where you need to make sure that someone might need to contact in your organization, their contact information is available. Whether or not to show on the contacts page, and what information you want to show about them. All of these fields are pretty self-explanatory. We want to talk about the email option. We mentioned this when we were taking a look at the title. So when we're talking about your title email address, that's the email address that's associated with the title you've created. Now, in the case of our finance director, Beatrice, we have an email address that is associated with the title already. So we've opted to use the title email address. Now, in this case, maybe we don't have an email address that's associated with co-chair. So I will use the member's email address. But I don't want to make this visible to everyone. I only want to make this visible to members only so that we can kind of gatekeep some of the contact that happens there. And I can save that. Now, you can also add contacts and not show them on the Contact Us page. And the reason you might do this is simply to pair the person with a title and not necessarily have them be so easy for someone to reach out to and contact. So in this case, perhaps I want to have Samantha Elizabeth listed as a membership director in the system, so that she can receive notifications when someone joins or renews, or someone makes a payment and joins and renews. But I don't, again, want that shown on the Contact Us page. So I can make that connection so that the system knows who our membership director is. The system can send those notifications and can include Samantha's information in system emails as the membership director. But again, not super accessible, not shown on the website. I'll go ahead and cancel out of that before I make those changes. Now, those are the two really simple pieces to just making sure that you can get a couple of the most important people set up, ready to go on your website. So a lot of people, come to training and maybe aren't quite sure why their membership director isn't receiving notifications, why their treasurer is not receiving notifications. Usually the issue is that you haven't made the connection between the title and the contact. So for example, adding in the title of membership director and adding in my own email address does not let the system know that I'm the membership director and I need to receive those notifications. You still have to make that connection. And again, you don't have to display them on your Contact Us page, but you still have to tell the system who that particular title belongs to. Now, another question, and I am certain this probably came up in the chat already. If it hasn't, when you are setting up notifications, which we're about to do right now for your membership director and for your treasurer, you are only able to send those notifications to one person. So a lot of people ask if we are able to set up notifications for my membership director and my membership co-chair and my membership coordinator. The answer is no. The best way for you to go about doing that is have one person set up as membership director. They get all of those notifications and you just set up an auto forward rule on your end. But we only have the ability to identify the first person that you added as membership director as the membership director, and same for your treasurer. So once we've made that connection, I have popped into people options, and we did review this in our last webinar on people options. So I will just quickly show you that under notify membership director when, and again, we have a webinar on people options that goes through all of this in detail, but just to kind of point out here, this is where you would set up your membership director notifications. So once you've made that connection, again, you have the ability to set up that connection on your site. And the same is true in money options for your treasurer. So in money options in the money tab, I can go ahead and click that. And a little bit further down the page, whether or not we want to notify our treasurer on payments. And that's when you decide that you want your treasurer to receive an email every time someone makes a payment. Now, many of you are probably thinking that sounds like a lot of emails. And for some of you that might be, but for some other organizations, getting those emails can be vital to, communications that you have to send. So making sure that you have those titles set up, you have them paired with contacts, that you only have one assigned to each person, and that you have double checked that. So making sure that you have all of those things checked off on your list should get you in great shape to make sure that your titles look great and that you're getting the notifications that you should be. Now that we've gone through our titles and contacts, let's go ahead and start talking about adding in some additional access. We've talked about getting our team set up. Now let's start setting up the people who are going to be hitting the ground running and helping you build and maintain your website. I'm first going to start off with coordinators. This is our next level down in our 7 layers of security. I'm signed in as Martin Smith. Martin Smith can see everything. He can do everything. Next up, I'm going to show you what Jenny Cho can do. And to start, I am going to take a look at some of the rights that Jenny Cho has and how she got there. So Jenny Cho has a handful of different rights that have been assigned to her. So I'll kind of go through them briefly and then talk about how we got there. Jenny Cho is the coordinator for discussion forums, events, blast emailing, and photos. So the way that I set up Jenny Cho's rights, the easiest way is I popped into the club tab, again, that might be labeled differently, and I selected administrators and coordinators. Now, this might be sort of the number one quickest way that people might be used to adding a coordinator or even another administrator to your website. While we're here, let's just briefly kind of talk about what we're seeing. At the very top, I have the ability to add additional administrators using my member selector. You always have to have at least one administrator. You cannot have a website that does not have an administrator. You can see here that we have 2, but for some reason we can't delete Martin Smith. That's because our admin test admin is not active. So because that membership's not active, it means they can't actually sign in to do anything until they've renewed their membership, which means that effectively Martin Smith is the only person who can fully manage the site. So you aren't seeing that little trash can icon next to Martin Smith. If we add an additional administrator who, let's say, doesn't have any issues with their membership currently, now we have delete icons next to both Martin and Richard, and I can remove any of these at any time. Underneath that, we have our coordinators. I find that the best way for me personally to view this is by viewing by coordinator. If we view by function, that just lists the entire essentially catalog of everything on your site, along with options to maintain those additional coordinators. I find it much easier to view these by coordinator, but that's an additional view that you have. Now, with Jenny Cho, I'm going to take a look at the functions that she's been assigned to, and that'll give me an idea of what it might be like to set up someone else with some additional rights. At the very top, I have Jenny Cho, who's been assigned as my member. And if I'm scrolling through here, I'm seeing things that look very familiar. It looks a lot like our control panel, and it's designed to. It's separated into all of the control panel tabs, so it makes it really easy to find the things that you're looking for. Now, some interesting things about adding someone as a coordinator through the control panel like this, you see that we have in our report section groups of reports here. So you're able to assign someone to the group of report that they might be able to run on their own. And that gives them access to the reports feature, but just that group of reports and every report in there. So we have groups of reports. We do have the ability to give someone coordinator access to setup features. So if you have someone who is really great at building websites and you want to give them access to just your website look and feel, maybe also your photos and web graphics so they can add custom images, you have that option here. And at the we'll go back into our main page here, and we'll talk about some of the other options that we're seeing. Now, I was taking a look at the functions that I assigned to Jenny. If I wanted to add a new coordinator, I just select Add Coordinator, choose the new member from my member selector, and assign those individual rights. Now, back in my Admin and Coordinators option, apart from being able to add a fresh coordinator, I can also copy coordinator rights to a new person. Now, I also have the option to copy coordinator rights to someone who already has coordinator rights. And I want to talk about that briefly so that we can kind of maybe get a couple of things out of the way that might be issues. If you copy someone's coordinator rights to another coordinator, it is not a copy and function. It is a copy and replace function. So if I were to copy Manny's rights over to Jenny, Manny has far fewer rights than Jenny. Manny can access almost nothing. Jenny would lose all of the rights that she has, and she would be left only with what Manny can access. And Manny, if we take a look at his rights here, Manny can only access a custom page. And so his access is extraordinarily limited. So when you're talking about adding in or copying, the copy function can be really, really helpful, but you want to make sure that you aren't missing out on some additional rights that someone might have. Next to that copy function, we have our favorites. Now, when I assigned Jenny Cho all of that work, I did her a solid and I added all of those modules to her favorites for her. So when Jenny signs in, she sees this quick access menu of just the favorites that she's been assigned to. And I can do that with anyone else. So anyone else that has access to some specific features, I see only those features in their available pages, and I can create a special little favorites menu for them. Martin Smith at the top does have his own favorites menu. We don't use it a lot when we're going through training, but as someone who's constantly working on your site, perhaps you really do need access to those items from the front end. We typically always spend time on the back end on our sites, but your favorites option can be a really, really useful tool. So what I want to do now is sign out and sign in quickly as Jenny Cho while she's fresh in our minds. And I want to take a look at her access. So I've signed in as Jenny Cho, and Jenny Cho looks like she has access to the control panel here, and she also has that great favorites menu that I've set up for her. Since I was assigning her all that work, I figured I'd save her a little bit of time. Now I'll go into my control panel as Jenny Cho, and I see a limited dashboard. So if all of you are admins who are signing into your control panel normally see all of those really colorful charts and graphs, we're not seeing those as Jenny. Jenny has limited access, so she's only seeing reports that don't conflict with the access that she doesn't have. And remember that we, again, gave her very, very specific access. So she can only see the tabs that contain the functions that she has access to. She had access to forums, events, blast emailing, and photos. So we see both of our options in the website tab. In communications, we'd see our emailing and discussion forums. And last, we see our support tab, as we mentioned. That's where we're going to access all of our support features. And that's the option that we have for Jenny. Now, when Jenny signs in, she sees just her ability to access these features. She does not have the ability to add anyone else as a coordinator, as an administrator. Jenny, as a coordinator, does not have the ability to assign further rights to people. So that's something that is limited to an administrator on your site. Now we'll go back into our website as Martin Smith. So hopefully we don't get a good case of whiplash during this webinar, logging in and out as a few people, but we're going to take a look at Martin one more time. And we're going to talk about subgroup rights and subgroup access and subgroup administrators. Now, our Northwest Balloon Club is what we would call a Model 2 site. A Model 1 site where we have multiple subgroups sharing websites. So everyone who's part of the Northwest Balloon Club, no matter what chapter they belong to, they're all signing into the same site. And a lot of our chapters on this site have their own separate web page. So you might want to then think about what types of rights your subgroup administrators have and subgroup coordinators as well. So let's take a look at subgroup admins. And for that, I'm going to go back into my club tab. And again, for organizations with subgroups, you're going to see an organization data option. And that's where you would see all of your individual subgroups. Now, what I've done here is I've assigned, if I right-click my Midwest subgroup and select administrators, I've assigned Larry Cho as my Midwest region subgroup administrator. So remember that when we talked about subgroup admins, we talked about them having essentially access to everything except the setup features. Now, when we talk about what they can access, they're going to be able to access everything, but just for their subgroup. So when they're taking a look at data in the People Manager, which they will have access to, they're only going to see people who belong to their subgroup. They're only going to see transactions for their subgroup, so on and so forth. Now, there is another way that you can limit access for subgroup options. So I want to talk about adding in coordinators through the configure option of the control panel. And for that, let's say we'll pop over to the website tab, and I'm going to select configure because I want to add a coordinator to a module here. Now, for some of our modules, and when we pop into our coordinators tab, I'm going to go ahead and add a coordinator. For some of our modules, when we are adding in a coordinator through the control panel, we have the option to specify a specific subgroup that they should have coordinator access to that module for. Now, that is limited to a certain number of modules. Not every single module will allow you to have that specific access to just the module for that subgroup. So you may not see it in every single module that you're looking for, but some of them do have that subgroup notation. So again, it's giving someone coordinator access to the module. They can configure the module, they can add new things, but just for their subgroup. So coordinators for the document library, and we have an upcoming webinar on our document library in a couple of weeks. Coordinators for the document library for a specific subgroup would have access to their subgroup folders. So what I am going to do now is take a look at what Larry Cho's view looks like. Remember, Larry Cho is a subgroup administrator. He's assigned rights by Martin through the club tab because he is the admin for the Midwest region. So I'm going to sign in as a different user here. And now when we take a look at Larry Cho's options, Larry Cho still has access to the control panel here. So remember, we're cycling through people who still can access the control panel, but their access is getting more and more limited as we go on. So I'll pop into Larry's control panel access and we can see every tab. But the tabs look a little bit different, don't they? So at the top right here, we aren't seeing a couple of things. We aren't seeing those control panel notices. We also aren't seeing our configure option. So keep that in mind. Your subgroup administrators, as we mentioned, are not going to be able to be making big changes on your site. They aren't going to be able to change the look and feel of your site, add a new bank account. They aren't going to be able to add additional administrators and coordinators. So their rights truly are limited to the day-to-day operations of their chapter or their region or their district. So when I'm taking a look at the different modules, again, I can't activate new modules. I'm limited to the modules that have been activated by my administrator. I do have a couple of things down here. So set up for member attachments. If I wanted to manage attachments for my chapter, I'd be able to do that, but you certainly don't have the ability to add a new member type or anything like that. And of course, in communications, you have access to emailing, but you're only able to email folks in your subgroup. It'll look like you're able to email all active members, but they're active members of your chapter. And if we take a look at our people manager here, we have 6 people in our database that are all part of the Midwest district, as opposed to when we sign in as Martin, we have about 30 people in our database, and we can take a look at that too. So Larry chose access, again, pretty limited. He is able to sign in and complete the day-to-day functions of his club and, maybe send out a few emails, run a few reports, but Larry cannot make substantive changes to the website or to how the website functions. So now let's get even more granular, and I'm going to sign out once more and sign in as Martin Smith, because we're going to take a look at adding in coordinators for a single item, like a custom page or photo album. I'm, again, signed in as Martin Smith here. So we got Martin Smith, crazy colorful chart here. We see all of his options. Remember, when we signed in as Jenny, we didn't see any of this. So I'm going to select the website tab, because what I want to do is take a look at some custom pages that I have set up for events that we hosted. And I'll go ahead and select search. Now, with all of our custom pages, next to our mobile options, we also have our coordinators icon. This coordinators icon pops up a handful of places on your site. We just saw it when we were looking at coordinators by function on the admin coordinator panel, and we can see it here. This allows you to assign a coordinator for this specific page and for each specific page. So if you want someone to be able to add and manage all of your custom pages, we would manage that by either adding a coordinator through the control panel and selecting configure and custom pages and adding a coordinator to give them access to all of the pages. We can certainly do that back on the admin coordinator page in the club tab. Or we can just say, I want to give Manny Diaz access to just the summer fly-in pages, because those are the pages that he's going to be managing. He manages the summer fly-in events, so it just makes sense to give him access to those as well. I can select Manage Coordinators, and I already have Manny here. Adding a coordinator works the same every other place on your website where we're just searching through our membership database. So Manny has access to this custom page, as well as the remaining 2 custom pages that you see here that are all associated with the fly-in. And that's all he has access to. So what I want to do now is take a look at what that looks like for Manny and how Manny has to then take a look at how he can access the items that he has been given access to. So as Manny, again, we still have our control panel, and let's see what that gives us. So with our control panel, we have access to the website tab, and it looks like we have access to custom pages. But when I select that, all I see are the custom pages that I have access to and none of the other options. So when we're looking at this page as an administrator, I have options to search through pages. I have options to add pages, add categories. Even within the maintain column, my options are severely limited here. I can't even delete a page as someone who has access to the page. So a custom page coordinator who has access to all custom pages would certainly be able to delete pages, but someone who you've just given them access likely to update and make changes to pages, they certainly can't delete that page. So again, we have some limited access here for our custom pages for Manny. Manny only has access to individual custom pages, but as we can see, that still gives them access to that support tab. So even with access to just one item, when you get access to that item through the control panel, it's giving you that support tab access. Now, the final stop that we will make today is our most limited item of access, and that would be someone who can only access specific items that are not accessed through the control panel. So first, let's talk about how that access is granted. And what we're talking about is that sort of last level before we hit members: forum moderator, blog author, event coordinator. So let's talk about, blog authors. So in our communications tab, when we're configuring blogs, we add in blog authors for each of our individual blogs. Now, blog authors access their blogs in a couple of different ways. They can access them through the control panel or through the front end of blogs, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So your blog authors, again, we have a lot of tutorials that talk about blogs, so that'll cover that. We are also actually updating our blogs tutorial. So make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube so you can get notified when we release that new tutorial for blogs. But for now, you can click that members icon and assign a new author. So we can see Samantha Elizabeth has been assigned an author to the Up in the Air blog. She's also been assigned forum moderator and event coordinator. And so we know how to assign a couple of those things. So in the interest of time, I'm going to fast forward and take a look at Samantha Elizabeth's access and how she's able to access those specific items, which again are not giving her access to the control panel. So let's go ahead and log in as, all right. So we are signed in as Samantha Elizabeth. Samantha does not have access to the control panel, so everything's super blank up at the top. How is she ever going to manage what she has to do? So let's start with forum moderator. So when I'm taking a look at my member resources and I'm navigating to forums, when I go to the specific forum, or when I go to the forums page, I can see maybe a little bit of a different view for one of the forums, at least. So for all of these forums, I see just the title as well as the description. But for announcements at the bottom, I have some extra info here. This info, this forum members only and active, that's only visible to administrators or someone who is moderating forums. This is extra info not visible to members. So right away, I can kind of see I have a little bit of an extra eye into my NWBC announcements forum, which just happens to be the forum that Samantha's been a moderator for. Now, when I access the forum, even though I'm accessing it from the front end of the module, the system knows that I am the moderator for this forum. So when I'm in the forum, I can actually manage the forum members. I can, on the right-hand side here, I can edit those messages, archive messages. I can perform a lot of administrator options because I'm the moderator for the forum. I have the ability to manage the forum, manage messages in the forum. I just can't delete the forum. I can't add a new forum. So my access is limited, but within that specific forum, I have quite a bit of access. With blogs, again, accessing it from the front end, we did talk about I can access that through my member profile, but from the front end, when I'm taking a look at blogs that I might have access to, let's see where my blog is. I believe that I was accessing, let me go ahead and sign in here. Let me pop into my profile and take a look at blogs. So here is my post manager for Up in the Air, and I can see, so I would normally be able to see that on the front end. I'm not sure why that wasn't popping up, but I can access my blogs through the member profile for that particular member. On the front end, we'll take a look at what that looks like from Barton, so you can kind of see how you would access blogs from a member's perspective. But let's take a look at our final item, which would be our events. So Samantha Elizabeth is also the event coordinator for the Night at the Opera. Night at the Opera on our event calendar. So Samantha's again just navigating to the event because she doesn't have access to the control panel. She can't access the back end of that event, but if she navigates to the event on the front end, just from the calendar, again, the system recognizes that she is an admin essentially for this specific event. So she has those admin options and she can access it again. No access to the control panel here, but she has access to this specific event. She can run reports on the event. She can manage the event as though she was an administrator, just without all of that administrative access. And so, without further ado, I'll see if Devin has any questions that he'd like to pipe up with. That's about all I have for you. And I'm sure that we have some cues. So I'll go ahead and log back in as Martin Smith so that we're ready to go. Devin, what do we have?
Yeah, we've got a few really good questions. The first one, jumping back way to the beginning, can you just go over a refresher? We had a couple people ask about, I know it can be a bit confusing, the member versus title email and how to kind of like control where an email, what email is displayed on the contacts page and whether a title email is used or not.
Perfect. So with your title, you have the option to display an email address associated with the title or an email address associated with the person to whom you've assigned the title. So let's take our finance director, for example. Our finance director has the finance@northwestballoonclub.com email address. This is a generic email address that we use for all of our finance directors. No matter who sits in that chair, whether it's Beatrice Clark, Samantha Elizabeth, or Manny Diaz, it's always going to be the same email address. So when you go into configuring your contact then for your finance director, and we go ahead and configure that as Beatrice, we're faced with the option. Do we want to use that title email address, or does Beatrice maybe prefer that emails come straight to her personal email address? She doesn't want to have to access that title email. You have that option. Now, without having a title email address, if there isn't an email address configured, Devin, does it automatically default to the member's address?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure if the
Okay.
title email is blank and then you choose title, I think it just displays nothing. But the notifications, I think, would still go to the member.
Yes. And so all of these are really just personal preferences within your organization and the member that you're adding that contact to. And so this determines what email is used and displayed for that particular contact. So again, your member's email address might be beatricelovesballoons@gmail.com. And maybe even just as an organization, you think it looks better to have those sort of branded vanity email addresses as opposed to your member's email address.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, there's kind of two ways to get those emails. This is something that gets asked a lot as well. If you are an organization that has a domain and you want those domain emails, kind of like, northwestballoonclub.com, you could do that one of two ways. If you have your own domain email set up already, you might have like a third party, Microsoft account or GoDaddy email accounts, or, any number of email management tools. You may have those set up through third party. The other option is to use ClubExpress. If we are managing your domain, you could have us forward those emails for you. And Sam's looking at the email accounts option right here. You can click into email accounts. I don't think we have email accounts set up on this demo website, but essentially you would just say, whenever someone sends an email to finance@northwestballoonclub.com, go ahead and forward that over to, Nancy at Gmail. And so, it's kind of just like it's, vanity. Think of it as like a vanity license plate. It's just a placeholder that then gets bounced over to the real email address.
I've pulled
Oh, we
up.
do have. Okay.
Well, this is regular demo club, so we can kind of see
Okay.
what this might look like for someone else.
Yeah. So here you can see, when someone sends an email to treasure@demoforums.org, it goes to the email, test123@demoforums.org. That's actually a bad example. Is there a Gmail in there or something? But you get the idea. It's we say whenever I get an email here, go ahead and send it, there. Um, so it's not an actual inbox, it's just kind of like a dummy email. Um, Another question we got, and this is actually one I wasn't sure of off the top of my head. Is there a way to allow subgroup admins to be able to add members to their subgroup? So that's two different types of questions. Are subgroup admins allowed to take members who are not in their subgroup and add them to their subgroup? And I'm almost certain the answer to that is no. They would only have the kind of like the rights to alter members who are already within their purview. But then we have the other kind of question is, can they add members whole cloth to the site? I think the answer there is also no, but I'm not sure entirely.
No, so I don't think that they looks like they can add a member. I know that administrators have the ability to assign people to subgroups when they've signed up and they haven't yet been assigned to a subgroup. But no, I don't believe that subgroup administrators have the ability to assign a subgroup.
Okay. Yeah. So that looks like the answer to that is no. Someone also asked, can you mix ClubExpress email forwarding with external hosting? Kind of. With the same domain, no. The reason for that has to do with domain routing. So whenever, let's say if your domain is, myclub.com and you go to, or let's just keep using northwestballoonclub.com. When someone sends an email and it says at northwestballoonclub.com, behind the scenes, we have to configure a bunch of things that say like, hey, we've gotten an email that needs to go to, this address. There's not a way for two people to share that. It has to go to one location. So the option with one domain would be to either have ClubExpress manage all of those domain emails or to have a third party manage those emails. Now, I have seen options where people have multiple domains, and so they might have, northwestballoonclub.com and bc.com. And so in that scenario, you could have one set of domain emails go to ClubExpress and one go to a third party option. But if we're talking about just one website domain set of emails, that can't be shared amongst different people.
So there was one question that talked about if there's a sort of notification of changes that happen with admins and coordinators. There isn't a notification, hey, a new admin's been added to your website, but you do have the ability to run reports. So one of the reports that we have would be, and we've talked about this in past webinars, your website security report that shows you who has access to what separated either by function or by member. And it's a really great way, apart from, having specific access and subgroup access, it's a really great comprehensive way to show who has access in your site. So we highly encourage you, go ahead, run that report, just see what you see.
And we had a question, how do you assign a member to get the new member sign up email when they submit an application? So if you have an application process where they have to be approved for membership, once they submit, there's not a way, there's no, you don't have to hit a button for them to get that email. They will automatically get an email as long as you have your system emails turned on. So if any system emails are going out, whenever a member submits an application, they're going to get an email appropriate to that response. If there isn't an approval required, then they would just get the, new member email with their username and password. And information on how to pay for their membership if payment is needed. If you're one of those organizations out there where membership doesn't require approval or payment, then once they apply and become members, they would just get a, welcome, no payment needed, essentially, with their username and password. But yeah, there's no button to hit to make sure that they get that new member sign up email. It should just go through automatically. Can someone with people manager rights edit the member profile? Yes. So if you have access to the people manager, you are able to, do as the title says, manage people. There is an alternate people tool you can give people, and it's called People Lookup, which lets you look at people's information, but does not allow you to make any sort of changes. So here you can see we're looking at the People Lookup. We can see names, phone numbers, addresses, expiration dates, stuff like that, but you are not able to actually make changes there. So that's one way you can give someone access to, your membership roster without giving them the ability to control people's profiles. Let's see. So how do we set up? I've seen this question a couple times. How do we set up, who gets those notifications? Again, that's all to do with contacts. So as long as someone is holding the appropriate title, they will get the notification email. So if, again, for example, the financial director is set up to be the quote unquote treasurer. And so in this instance, Beatrice Clark would get notifications about payments. If we're talking about memberships, whoever is set up to be the membership director is going to get those information about member signups. There are some toggles. Sam's showing you one of the ones for the treasurer. There's a few toggles for different notifications that you can send or choose not to send. So you might want to check your people options and your money options page. If those notifications aren't going through, there's a couple toggles. I believe with ClubExpress, most sites, those are turned on by default. But if by some chance in the past one admin went in and turned those off, you may want to double check those options page and make sure that those notifications are turned on. So as long as those settings are turned on and someone is holding that title with that assigned to them, they should get notification emails when appropriate. There's a comment. Someone asks, is it only admins that can add documents to a member's profile? If you're talking about the member uploads module, that allows people to attach documents to their profile, it depends on how you configure the documents. So you can say, this document can only be added by admins, or you can say, members are allowed to update the documents themselves. That's a configuration. And I believe we have either training videos or webinars that cover that otherwise. But yeah, that's just a configuration whenever you're setting up your member attachments. All right. It looks like our questions have slowed down. Sam, if you had anything else.
I do not believe I do. Want to thank everyone for taking the time today for our session. And of course, we will have a copy of this on our YouTube channel within a few days. So look for that. Thanks again for everyone for joining us, and we appreciate your attendance. We'll see you in the next webinar. Bye, everyone.